I'm in the middle of Salisbury Plain and I'm off to meet the Royal Engineers who are on a course to learn to use explosives. People have been blowing things up in war since gunpowder was invented by the Chinese hundreds of years ago. And it's still a really important part of warfare. But it's more complex than you might suspect.
In World War I, the Royal Engineers were pivotal in the development of new types of explosives. 100 years later, and blowing things up is still a vital part of their training.
This is a strange looking thing for an explosive. Looks like a case for a snooker cue.
No, it's the Bangalore torpedo. So it's primarily used for breaching wire obstacles. In one length, so this is one length of Bangalore torpedo, you've got approximately 2 kilos of explosive. When the explosive detonates, all the metal casing forms into fragments, and then that's what cuts the barbed wire.
We haven't got any razor wire, but hopefully it's going to cut this to pieces.
Yeah, hopefully it should cut this knife rest to pieces. It's a pretty powerful explosion.
The Bangalore torpedo was developed in India by the British Army in 1912 in order to clear old booby traps. On the Western Front, it was ideal for sliding through barbed wire before smashing it to smithereens. Barbed wire entanglements were a major problem in World War I, presenting a dense and often fatal obstacle to soldiers going over the top on the Western Front. It was notoriously difficult to clear. New types of artillery were developed to target the problem, and the Bangalore torpedo also proved of great use in breaking up sections of the wire. That's why it's so fascinating to see the Royal Engineers still using it a century later.
Firing now!
However, the sheer volume of wire meant that it wasn't until the introduction of tanks in 1916 that the British could really start to clear the battlefields.
That was a much bigger explosion than I was expecting. And the sort of the steel crossed structure that was sitting on top of it was sent cartwheeling across Salisbury Plain. It's been just shattered by the aluminium casing which went around the explosives in the torpedo. You can see how it's shattered into tiny fragments, which has then cut the steel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way along here. So if you imagined razor wire or barbed wire being above the torpedo, you can see quite clearly how these fragments would have just cut the wire and cleared the way.
After World War I, the Royal Engineers continued to develop the use of explosives, using increasingly sophisticated devices. Yet the type of targets they are trained to blow up today would also have been common targets for explosives a century ago. Such as taking out bridges or smashing through concrete bunkers. Today, the biggest charge is being used to blast out a huge crater.
Firing now!
Big enough to block off a road and impede enemy traffic.
That was amazing. There was a huge column of chalk and mud fired up into the air. I could feel a really powerful shockwave come through these walls, and this is 2 feet thick of concrete, and we're a good long way away from the explosions, but you could really feel it come through the walls. And being up on Salisbury Plain is amazing because you've got waist-high grass all around the range, and you could see the effects of the blast flatten the grass in all directions. And I think more than anything else, that really makes you appreciate the awesome power of the explosives that they're using. Whoa! It's an enormous crater. It would take several men, several hours to dig up something like this, but it happened just like that.
In World War I, the Royal Engineers had specialist tunnelling units to lay down charges beneath enemy trenches. And on 1st of July 1916, the first day of the Battle of the Somme, they were behind one of the biggest explosions in modern warfare, when over 25,000 kilos of explosives were used in a blast against the German front line. The resulting shockwaves were felt hundreds of miles away. Not that the engineers' work was restricted to destroying things. Towards the end of the war, its units played a vital role in assisting the British advance. Their work included road and rail repairs and bridging rivers and canals. Watching these Royal Engineers training to use explosives for combat zones such as Afghanistan is a real reminder how, in many respects, World War I saw the birth of modern warfare. New problems required new solutions, providing the foundations for much of the military's operations today.